Hi, John Robertson here, author of Run Toward the Roar. And I just want to start by sharing the best advice I ever got was when I was 17. Mr. Newton said, "Don't worry, don't forget, John, in a world of presents, people need presents." And I've never
Ooh,
forgotten it. Yep.
people need presents. That's interesting. So 17 years old. Who was this? Who was Mr. Newton? Was he a school teacher? Was he
No,
a Sunday school
he
teacher?
was,
Who was he?
yeah, actually, he was our minister. And he was one of those kind, gentle, and he got bone cancer, which apparently is the most painful one there is. And he was on morphine for the pain. And I remember thinking my first reaction when he said that was, "Ooh, he's got a little extra morphine in the bloodstream." And and it was like he read my mind. He said, "And no, John, that is not the meds talking." And oh, okay. And
So tell me
just to
about that. What
explain
does
it,
that
Phil,
mean, man? Yeah, what does it mean?
yeah, and that's exactly what I said. I said, "No, I don't get ya." And he said, "World of presents, people need presents." I said, "I understand that part, but I don't understand what it means." John, in a world of presents, people need presence.
Yeah, right
and
on.
and and ever since then I've thought, we honor titles and we honor letters after a name, degrees, whatever you want to call them. We honor all these things, ents, but at the end of the day, what do we really need? Somebody in the boat, paddling, rowing with us as we feel like we're sinking. They look at us and say, "Now this is exciting, row."
Wow. So, okay, so 17 though.
Yep.
17 years old. What did you do with that at 17, John? I mean, that's like a 35-year-old insight, right? That's not a 17-year-old's insight. That's a much older person. So how did that change you right then at 17, or did it take longer until you really
It
got that?
I'm a slow learner, Phil, so it took me a little longer. And it complements in the opposite way. I guess a better way to word it is it mirrors the worst advice I ever got. So one of the things that I learned in helping people or organizations or leaders deal with crisis, first thing is the event is never the real crisis. And the second part of that is, what can I possibly say to you? Pick a scenario. Think about us. You lose your job. Your partner has health issues. Your child has a health issue. Name me one thing, ENTS, one thing that I can say that's going to magically make it all better.
Yeah. Probably not unless you have a cure or you have a job for me. There's not much you can really do, right?
Yep, touche. And so one of the things, and by the way, if you've ever been through the loss of a loved one, like a funeral, celebration of life, this is where we really see this stuff. People say all forms of stupid, and I don't misinterpret that. They're trying to be helpful, but they've gone to a better place, or at least they're out of pain, or the one that I heard not that long ago was one of the children had died, and they had three children, one died, and somebody actually said, "Well, you have two others." Like, I didn't even know what to say to that. And
Wow.
so, and and what happens is people mean well when we say these unhelpful one-liners, cliches, but we're not thinking about ENCE. We're thinking about ENTS, about saying something to help them feel better, when in fact it's not. It's just be with them to say, "Yeah, this stinks."
Yeah, somebody to, like you said, man, somebody sit in the mud with us while we wallow just for a little bit, huh?
And I'm a firm believer, wallowing is not an issue. That's what makes us human. It's when we stay wallowing that's the issue.
Yeah,
Any
absolutely.
human being who's had a wall up has to wallow. Like it,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, the way a friend of mine work when we do grief work, one of the things that we talk about is grief is essentially emotional investment equals intensity of loss. That's all grief is. Most people think it's about death. And so therefore, if I'm emotionally invested in my car and I drive a Kia and I love my Kia, so you know what? When the car dies, intensity of loss. On the other hand, if I'm emotionally invested in relationships or a relationship and I lose that, still grief. It's just different.
Yeah.
And and so for many of us, we have to step back and take that time to say, what am I really passionate about? What am I really invested in emotionally, relationally, mentally, spiritually, morally, whatever? And what am I going to do like with that passion, with that
Yeah.
fire in the bones, if you will?
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting, right? And you do talk about that in the book, which is interesting, right? About running toward the war. The first thing that stood out to me is something we talked about in our prep call, and that is the passio fidelis, which I thought was super
Yep.
interesting, right? So talk to me, what in the heck is passio fidelis, and how do we use that to, to kind of live a better life, if you will?
Well, Phil, and I don't want to correct the host, but I'm going to correct the host. It's not maybe live a different life. It's
Ooh,
we will. Because fidelis is the root word, the Latin root word of fidelity, faithfulness, loyalty, and passio is the root word of passion. And the best, I had this discussion yesterday with a person. We were talking about head in the game kind of things. And I said, so have you ever had, do you play sports? And he said, no, I'm a artistic, creative person. I said, okay, musician, creative, or artistic? He said, no, musician. I said, guitar, keyboard, piano, guitar. I said, have you ever been playing the guitar and get that cramp in your hand where you're trying to learn a new chord? And he started to laugh and he said, actually, I was just learning one of those last week. And my brain was mentally picturing fingers should go, but the moving in their own direction. And it literally cramped up my hand. And I said, if you don't love guitar, that will take you out of the game. You won't play it. You'll find any number of reasons not to play again. If you have passion and you are faithful or loyal to learning the guitar and playing it with excellence, then that cramp will be something you massage out so that you can get back playing. And and Phil, one of the things that sometimes, and I'm hearing it a lot with the what's the term right now? The great resignation, which is just a really fancy way of saying people are refocusing their values. They've lived 2 years to say, what really matters right now going forward? Fidelity or faithfulness, passio fidelis. What am I passionate about? What am I living my life for instead of merely reacting about what I'm against, what I don't like? And,
yeah.
and Phil, I can 100% guarantee you, without knowing you very long, that you will have had, I'm going to be polite, one or two helpful people tell you what they don't like about you.
Sure, absolutely.
Uh,
You want me to name
and
them, or where do
if
you want me to
you
go
are
here, John?
no,
Call
no,
them
no
out?
names. Sorry, I should have
Oh,
clarified.
okay.
Yeah, no, no names. But were you when they were offering their helpful advice? Were you what it was you were?
Of course not. Right? Of course not. Yeah, that's not helpful. I don't love that. I don't care. That doesn't matter to me.
Key expression. Key expression you just used. I don't care. Matter to me. Because when we are passio fidelis, when we are loving what we're doing, we're loving what we're working towards, all kinds of experts in the stands, but they're not on the field playing with us. And we care. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, right? Of course. But we have to get there. We have to be passionate about something enough to be faithful to it, which I would argue the last 2 years, right, have given us the opportunities, the great reframing, if you will. Now I can relook
Yeah.
at my world and say, what's really important? Because I'll tell you what, I was one of those guys. I was on the road all the time, and I was like, yeah, this is
Hmm.
great. I love sleeping in hotel rooms and having a steak dinner, and I do. I like
Yeah,
steak for sure, But I'll tell you what,
I
I
hear you.
like more is my family. I like
Yeah.
being in my office, and I like my dogs, and I like my house and my own bed a whole lot more, and I'm more passio fidelis about that than I am about racking up frequent flyer miles.
And what you've just perfectly described is exactly, I call it the hot water tea bag principle or effect. If we ever want to find out what's important to a person or an organization, put them in hot water. Just like a tea bag, what's inside always leaks out. That's the last 2 years
Wow.
because people have started to say, okay, will this matter? Will this hotel room points matter? So when my kids are in their tens, in their teens, in their 20s, in their 30s, are they going to say, I am so glad that my mom or dad has 100 million hotel points at XYZ? Can I share a little story that illustrates this in a really neat way?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh, these kids were at they were high school soccer game, and they were all talking, and one young man said, one boy says, my dad is a doctor and he's a very significant surgeon. And the other player speaks up and says, well, my mom is, and named a really fancy title. And then somebody else said, oh, well, my mom is an engineer and some fancy title. And they all looked at this little play, the new player, and you. Well, I don't know what my mom and dad's title is, but my mom and dad are right over there. They're here.
Yeah.
And that's all the last 2 years have really talked about. Where are we? Be invested in that's going to go the distance, if you will, that will matter,
Wow. Wow. That story so well illustrates things for me. Like
doesn't it?
it's clear. Yeah, I mean that's super clear right there. They're right over there. And I think about my own parents who I know had to work their butt off just to, make sure they had three young boys to support. Especially my mom. She
Just
was a
the
single
grocery
mom.
bill. Yeah.
Yeah, just the grocery bill, right? And I think about that, and I think about how when she was able to show up, how that made such a big difference to anything, way more important than anything else that she did. And it's so interesting, that's where we are now, man. That's where we are. So is that running to the roar, or how does that work, John? Talk to me about that metaphor, the run toward the roar.
Yeah. So, run toward the roar is based on a simple analogy. As the lion ages, his muscle tone deteriorates, his teeth deteriorate, his mane deteriorate, but the way he keeps his pride is his roar. The lion's challenge his leadership. It's the roar stuff. But it's the lion hunts that matters. So a lion will go to this side of whatever herd of antelope, and the pride will go to the other side. Animal instinct is fight, flight, freeze, appease. When you get scared, fear kicks in. So majority of those antelope will run away from the roar and therefore run into the hunting party. Bigger problems. Humans are the only ones that we can train and et cetera, coach and mentor and everything else to run toward the roar, to run toward the things that we fear. And I mean, Phil, let's be honest. How many times have you and I reacted in fear to something to run away from what we fear, and we actually run into bigger problems?
More than I'd like to tell you, John. That's for sure.
And so the premise of the book is define the new norm. It has to be refinable. As we move towards it, we refocus it. As we move forward, we refocus it. So as that new norm gets defined and refined, then we build up the core, if you will, the attitudes, the beliefs, and the connections so that we're strengthened to run towards the roar, because that's where our definition of success is. So let me illustrate how an individual in a, and I'll ask it in an organizational context right after. But as a leader, I will ask them, really simple, how do you want people to describe you in a non-physical way?
In a non-physical way. Oh, that's okay. So that's a new question. I've not heard that before. So I would imagine, right, compassionate, empathetic, strong, capable, um, intelligent, understanding. That's those would be some words, I guess, I'd like to probably be described with.
So therefore, what I would do if you and I were having this conversation, I would, just like a desktop icon on the computer, Judah Glasser calls it double clicking. So double click on the word compassionate. What does that mean for Phil? If I was new to English, how would
Mm,
you teach me what what compassion means for Phil, or what Phil means by compassion? Because let me illustrate this. If I'm not defining it as for, I'm allowing you to interpret it as what it is not.
hmm.
So if I'm talking with a human being and they define compassion as pity, well, I don't share that definition. So compassion, and I've had this discussion more than once. Passion is that passio. It's a fire in the bones. It's something you want so bad it hurts. We add the prefix in English, calm. So therefore, I'm with something so much that it hurts, the fire in the bones. So compassion. What is it I care so deeply about that they have to know that, "Oh, I hurt too"? And I've never met anybody who says integrity is not one of my core values. I have worked with some people that, well, let me word it this way. They don't share the same definition of integrity that I do. I'll just leave it that way.
True enough. Yeah, that's true enough. Yeah. Hmm. Huh. So
And
so
so,
your
how do you
question
want
though,
people
so
to
was that
describe?
rhetorical? I mean, was that rhetorical? Like how do we describe, right? How do
No,
we describe that? And I'm not being funny here. Like, do we actually give them more
no,
words, or we display it
yeah.
as far as a definition, John?
Well, it's both. Both. If
Okay.
it so, there's three pieces to it. There's the non-physical descriptor. So picking on that word we were just talking about, compassion. So compassion, then there's Phil's definition of it. I don't care if Webster or anybody else shares that definition. I have to know what Phil means by it. And then the third piece is, what are the descriptors that Phil is going to be visibly modeling it by? So for
Okay.
example, if if I was using an example with one of our kids, and it was it was right around this discussion, and I can't remember what the term was, but it wasn't compassion, but we had this kind of discussion. Oh, encourage. And I said, so let me clarify. You're not feeling encouraged by me, because one of the things I want to do for people is encourage them. I don't like this model of bad boy, bad girl, you shouldn't have done that. That's not helpful. I like to encourage. So I got called out and said, Dad, I don't feel like you're encouraging me. Oh, okay. What's your definition of encouragement? Well, I don't know. What's yours? Well, really simple. En, the prefix en means to instill. Courage is an act in spite of the fear to do something because it's the right thing and I feel like doing it. So therefore, for me to encourage another person means to instill courage. So I guess my question is, what you just did that take courage? Well, no. So how do I encourage you when you just said what you didn't take any courage? I can praise you, tell you what a wonderful boy are you. And this is part of that whole non-physical descriptor because it comes back to our values. And values are the motivational preferences that we live now, our daytimer and bank statements. Where we spend our time and our money are our real values, not what we tell people.
Wow.
And I mean, turn it around. Turn it around. I, and I did this. It was just last week, and I prefaced it with it was an organization I was speaking at. I said, so this is normally my career limiting move point. So before I say go any further, I know that this is kind of where I stick my finger in the socket. How many of you know, and I don't know what there was, 40, maybe 50 people. I could say evangelically, oh, there was 150, 200 people in the room, but realistically, there'd be about 40 to 50. And I said, how many of you know your organizational values? What are your organization's values? And I'm looking around, and Phil, all I could think was, see that in flames, John? That's your career because it's just going down in flames. Because there wasn't a single hand that went up, not one. And the CIO was sitting there as well. And I said, so not being the sharpest tool in the shed, how do people evaluate decisions when we don't know what our values are?
Wow. Wow. That's a
And
big question, dude.
yeah, well, and that's why I have that gift of irritation. People keep trying to hug me and it's both hands around the neck, and but it's because I've been at those funerals, Phil, where there's 5, 6 of us in the room, and they talk about what a wonderful person this individual is, and every ounce of me wants to say, hold it. There's 5 or 6 of us in the room. What am I missing? And 4 of them were family. And I've also been at funerals of a 19-year-old young woman who died of cancer after a 14-year battle, and I've been at a funeral of an 80, I don't know what he was, 83, 87 years old, died of dementia. He'd been cocooning, withdrawing from it for about 5 to 7 years. And this 80, I'm going to say 87, but whatever he was, this 87-year-old had a packed standing room only. This 19-year-old had 350 to 400 people in the church plus 200 minimum live streaming her service. You want to talk about values?
Yeah. Yeah.
This 19-year-old, I met her, and this 19-year-old, here she is going through chemo, radiation, all the stuff that cancer does, the treatment that they do for cancer. And what's her question? Hey, so what have you been doing lately? What what's boring? What's thrilling for you? And I found out by talking with her mom, she didn't want to talk about the crap that was in her own life. She wanted to talk about what other people were doing to raise the bar.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
presence, man.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
That's
is. And
presence.
the ENTS, I could focus on all the things. So that 87-year-old never had a college, never had a university degree, never had any fancy title. He was just a small businessman in a small town, or he was a businessman in a small town, whatever. And she was 19-year-old. She just got accepted into university and didn't finish her first year university and died of cancer. And I can look at all that ENTS and think, yeah, they don't have anything. But you know what? They got a boatload more than many people who have all those things.
Wow. Wow. So okay, so let's bring this home, man. So how do we actually do this, right? How do we actually run toward the roar when, like biologically, we're trained to run, man. Like I'm gonna run
Yep.
the other way. I hear something loud, I hear a big noise, right? I'm going the other direction
Yeah.
by default. So how do I kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, fix myself and go the other way? How do I run toward the roar, man?
Okay. First of all, that's part of the thinking that needs to get addressed. Instead of thinking fix or like sick care versus healthcare, think grow towards, not grow away from. So, what's your definition of, since you mentioned, um, the hotel and the air miles or travel miles and all the other stuff,
Hmm.
what's your definition of a great marriage? Not a good one, but a great one. And this is rhetorical. I don't want to bring it out of you. But what's your definition of being a great dad? What's your definition of being a great business person? Then I would add the second part of that. What's your definition of being a great business person in leadership? Start writing out those definitions, because what we focus on gets done. How many cliches have we heard over the years that kind of preach that message? And then, okay, if that's my definition of a great whichever, I want to be a great leader. Here's how I define being a great leader. I want to be followable. I want to be trustable. I want to be respectable, even if people don't like me. So, how do I grow my trustableness? How do I grow my respectableness? And those definitions have to be in writing, because business 101, if it's not in writing, it does not exist. And as we start to write those out, then we have to look at, okay, what's my attitude? I'm actually rewording some of the pieces and more looking at the abilitude versus attitude. Because if I'm not dealing with my emotions well and I'm not physically strengthening myself, I will not be able to run toward the roar. It's not possible. What are my spiritual? And that's not religious, it's my beliefs. If you're my supervisor, Phil, and I believe you're out to get me, I'm a spiritual person. And cognitively or psychologically or mentally, how am I training my mind instead of, holy smokes, is this ever going to hurt? Training my mind to say things like, this is not the way I thought that was going to go. Now, this is exciting. And then the other part that 90% of human beings struggle with, myself being one of them, is what's called relationship management. No names, Phil, please. But if you remember the old vehicles, we had the dome lights, and we usually left them on the coldest night of the year, which meant the next morning our battery would give us that na 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 na, and it was called click click click. How many of us have dome lights but people?
Yeah,
No
for
names.
sure. For sure. Of course, they drain the heck out of us, right? Those energy suckers.
And so, therefore, what are we doing relationally to recharge? And the best way to look at this is by through our values to say, why is this person in my calendar? Why is this person not in my calendar? Go back to that story I shared. My parent is here, or my parents are here. Okay. Who are those people in our life that charge our battery? And then morals is self explanatory. If I do not know what I am for, I am always going to be reacting. I mean, that's just human nature. We live in a culture that tells us all the things they don't like. Watch what happens when we ask them, so what do you like? What do you want? What are you for? And most often, they'll get mad at us because they don't have an answer. And to run toward the roar means being very intentionally. Stop putting the cell phone, ourselves, on airplane mode, thinking we're going to recharge ourselves. Everybody knows, anybody's got a cell phone knows that airplane mode does not recharge a cell phone. Why are we thinking that unplugging from work and doing those things is going to recharge us? So it starts, Phil, with defining a positive. The acronym I use is PIES. It has to be positive, it has to be in your control, it's going to impact the environment because some people we can't hang out with. And then SMART goals, and just Google SMART goals. There's all kinds of documents about them. But how do I want people to describe me? What's my definition of being a great leader? What's my definition of being a great husband? What's my definition of being a great dad or father-in-law or uncle or what aunt or whatever? And I have to define it in the positive. I want my kids to know that I have their back even when I don't agree with what they've done.
Wow.
And what's happening right now, think about all the buzz terms that are going on. Engagement, mental health, resilience, all the terms that are going on right now. And many times it just comes down to, what are you for? What what is it you want to be known for? And the only way to run toward the roar is to define that, because then when we get our Charlie horse or our wallop or whatever it is, if you love what you do, you will find a way to get back in the game.
Yeah. Right on, man. Right on. So we find our Passio Fidelis, right? We find our pies, if you will, and we run towards the roar. That's awesome, man. So, John, your book is great too, man. The whole book is awesome. I learned a lot today about, pies, positive in your control, environment, and your smart goals. You say in the book that the event is never the real crisis, which is super important for us to
Hmm.
remember, and that fight or flight and
Sure is.
run towards the roar instead of away from the roar. I appreciate that so much, John. So, if people want to get to know you a little bit more, where would you send them? Where should they go?
The simplest way to do this is, it all starts with a conversation. So the business is Fort Log, Fort, Fort, safe place in the frontier. You got to know where you're going. And a log is a journal to sail the seas, because there's no point going there alone. Fortlog.co, because I work with you. I colleague, collaborate, coach. So fortlog.co/Phil. Easiest way to do it.
Wow.
And just sign up and let's book that call. And you can let me know if you want to call, a Zoom, or a Teams discussion. But let's just have that partnership and start with a conversation.
There you go. So, folks, if anything resonated with you in this conversation with John, get to know him a little bit more. Go to fortlog.co/Phil. That's fortlog.co/ my name, Phil, PHIL. Make that happen. So, John, thanks for your time. Thanks for your energy. Thank you for sharing your Passio Fidelis and being present with me. I appreciate you, man. Good stuff.
Well, and Phil, I truly appreciate it. And just to bring it home, can I just share first piece of advice, because it speaks directly to this theme?
Absolutely.
Do you have enough time for? Okay.
I do.
Worst piece of advice. So one of my degrees is in psychology, and I doing the counseling hat and all the other stuff. And I still remember being told being professional means being reserved in our emotions, having that professional veneer. Worst advice in the world, because if I'm professional and it means showing no emotion, so if I'm doing a death notification of a young child, a job termination, any number of those significant events, and I show no emotion, it's going to be impossible to show my passion for the things that matter. So somewhere along the line, suck it up, put your big boy pants, big girl pants on, grow a backbone, all those cliches. It's time for us to live our passion and stop being known for what we're against. And Phil, I just want to say thank you, because the way that you are so for encouraging people, challenging them, but most importantly, you take the time to investigate behind the scenes. So it's not just one of those flighty, off the cuff, fluff and stuff conversations. And so I've been listening to your podcast, but more importantly, I appreciate the values that you walk the talk with, not just blow sunshine. So thank you, Phil.
Thank you, John. And that's a wonderful place to end. Again, get to know John Robertson. Go to fortlog.co/Phil and schedule some time.